if she'd let more babysitter kids. Look, I don't want to get into people's kids, so let's leave Kellyanne Conway out of it. But that's a decent standard, though, on whether you'd vote for Roy Moore. If you'd let your 14-year-old daughter in a room or a house or a car alone with Roy Moore, then you go ahead and vote for him. But by the way, I'd tackle you and make sure I got her out of there. All right, Mary says, as a Christian, I don't ever want to hear these evangelical pastors who still support Moore ever shitting on the Catholic Church's pedophilia problem. They are evidently cut from the same cloth, all disgusting hypocrites. Certainly seems fair enough in this context. Okay, guys, one more thing. We got Black Friday coming up. That's later this week, right? So we're doing 10 days of sales at shoptyt.com. So this last one's pretty cool. You're going to get a free poster if you spend over $100, bless your heart. And if you want more deals, you're going to text 228466. 228466. And so this is day 6 of the 10 days of Black Friday, and you get that super cool poster for free if you've got over $100 in order. So thank you, guys. All right, now let's get back to the news of the day. A really fun and interesting story out of BuzzFeed. It is about National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster. Now, he's calling Donald Trump names behind his back, apparently, which I love. These are some of my favorite stories. But wait, because there's a twist near the end of this story. There might be a reason why this is in the news in the first place, and it is to torpedo McMaster. So find out how they might be doing that and why. So I'll get to that in a second. First, let me tell you what it is. So McMaster apparently mocked President Trump's intelligence at a private dinner with a powerful tech CEO, according to 5 sources with knowledge of the conversation. Okay, so what did he say? The top national security official dismissed the president variously as, quote, an idiot and, quote, a dope, with the intelligence of a, quote, kindergartner, the sources said. Now, I find this to be the least surprising thing in the world. If McMaster didn't even say it, I'm sure he thought it. Now, they have 5 sources. They actually have a 6th source that you'll hear about in a second. But I'll tell you about why those sources might be leaking this at this point. But is Donald Trump a dope? Of course he is. Does everybody who worked with him know that? They know it better than we do. That's why they told Bob Corker, the senator from Tennessee, hey, go warn people. We got to babysit this guy. He is dangerous and unstable. And, of course, as everybody knows, Rex Tillerson, apparently also his own Secretary of State, behind the scenes called him a moron. Anyone that could turn on television or Twitter can see that with their own eyes and hear it with their own ears. You don't need McMaster to tell you that. But if you work with him, trust me that you would get a lot more frustrated. Because the more I found out about him during the campaign, the more I was telling you his number one problem is actually incompetence. The man is a buffoon of the highest order. You don't need to spend that much time to know that. But if you're forced to spend a lot of time with him like McMaster is, it is unsurprising that you would come to that conclusion. Now, nonetheless, the spokesperson for the National Security Council, Michael Anton, says, no, quote, those false comments represent the diametric opposite of General McMaster's actual views. Really? The diametric opposite? He thinks Trump is a genius and a mastermind? Okay, I doubt it. A 6th source, who was not familiar with the details of the dinner, told BuzzFeed News that McMaster had made similarly derogatory comments about Trump's intelligence to him in private, including that the president lacked the necessary brain power to understand the matters before the National Security Council. Again, these are not shocking allegations. Unless you're in the Trump cult, you could see very clearly that he is not a very bright guy, to say the least. Okay. I mean, look, even if you think Trump, no, he's a big businessman. He inherited all his money, and he went bankrupt 6 times. He's a total loser. But even if you look at that and go, no, I didn't know the bankruptcy is any, I don't know, he looks rich, fine, right? Well, why would he then admit on national TV that he fired James Comey, the head of the FBI, because he was looking into a Russian investigation of Trump? Who would be that stupid to admit that against their own self-interest? There's no 3-dimensional chess. There's barely 2-dimensional checkers going on with Trump. Okay. More from BuzzFeed. Indeed, 3 of the sources said that McMaster disparaged multiple members of the administration to Katz, that's the CEO from Oracle that he was talking to, including Tillerson, Secretary of Defense James Mattis, former White House Chief Strategist Steve Bannon, and President Trump's son-in-law and senior advisor Jared Kushner. Of Kushner, one source told BuzzFeed News, McMaster said he had no business being in the White House and should not be involved in national security issues. Well, that also is undeniably true, but Kushner's incompetence is overpowered by Donald Trump's incompetence. Neither one of them should be in the White House. But now here comes the twist, and this is very interesting. So the person that they were talking to, or McMaster was talking to there, is Oracle CEO Safra Katz. Okay, and we're going to get to everybody's motivations here, but an unnamed source said that Katz said the conversation was so inappropriate that it was jaw-dropping. Now, the top lobbyist for Oracle says, no, this conversation didn't happen. But no matter what, the top lobbyist for Oracle would say that. But is Katz throwing McMaster under the bus here by revealing this publicly? It might be her, or it might be someone else at Oracle. So let's find out when all this surfaced in the first place. News of the July dinner first surfaced in August when Axios reported that Republican mega donor Sheldon Adelson decided to support a campaign alleging that McMaster was anti-Israel after speaking with Katz about her meeting with the National Security Advisor. That decision stemmed, multiple sources tell BuzzFeed News, from comments McMaster made to Katz, praising President Obama's nuclear deal with Iran and describing Israeli settlements in Palestinian territory as a major problem. So Joseph Bernstein, who wrote the story for BuzzFeed News, reporting that, well, you should also keep in mind that the real problem with McMaster is not that he thinks that President Trump is a dope, but that he thinks the settlements are a major problem. And the Iran deal was a good one. You know why? Because the Iran deal was an excellent deal. They no longer have uranium, cannot develop it for nuclear weapons. So, but Sheldon Adelson is a massive right-winger on the issue of Israel. And so anyone who says the settlements are a problem are not his guy. So McMaster must be removed. This is some serious skullduggery. So behind the scenes, Adelson, a major, massive donor to the Republican Party, apparently trying to pick off cabinet members based on what their views are of settlements in a different country. Gee, I wonder if money in politics is a problem, where guys like Adelson are allowed to give tens of millions of dollars in what are obviously legalized bribes, and then they go order people around and say, no, I don't like that cabinet member, I like the other one. You allow private financing of elections, you get people serving private interests. So, and if they can't get their way, no, they got to find a different way to take out a guy like McMaster, who has an opinion not about this country, but about a different country that they don't like. They don't like his opinion about a different country. Okay. McMaster, and now this is Mediaite, we go to Lawrence Bonk, who's reporting on this, notes that a lot of folks raise their eyebrows about this story. Bernstein says, look, I know, we talked about it internally as to why this story was being leaked months later, but he believes that his sources are accurate. But anyway, Mediaite reports McMaster booted National Security Council official Ezra Cohen-Watnick in August as part of his purge of the council, in which he fired many Bannon loyalists. Guess where Cohen-Watkin works now, or Watnick? Oracle, the same software company whose CEO met with McMaster for the dinner in which he is alleged to have gone off on Trump. So a guy gets fired by McMaster for being, and he's, these people are working at Oracle? I thought Oracle was a good company. You have these, I don't know anything about cats, but Ezra Cohen-Watnick is a lunatic. So he got fired for being a lunatic from the Trump administration. That's how crazy he is. So he gets fired, and Oracle's like, oh, great, a total incompetent buffoon with wild, insane conspiracy theories. Come on over to Oracle. Then at Oracle, all of a sudden, there's all these sources saying, oh, do you know what McMaster said about Trump? Oh, McMaster can't be trusted. He thinks that President Trump is not bright. But behind the scenes, as the original report, as Bernstein unveiled at BuzzFeed News, the real concern with him is the settlements. Adelson and some of the other guys what, apparently really like the settlements. Oh, hey, we've occupied these people for decades and decades and never given them freedom. Yay! Let's make sure we keep that policy up. By the way, they do not represent all of Israel, and they do not represent Jewish Americans. That is their own opinion, and they are right-wingers. There are many great people on the left and moderates who don't agree, who believe there should be a two-state solution, and who don't believe that you should try to destroy people's career if you disagree. So, at least now you know what the real game is and what's at hand here. So, by the way, McMaster's a right-winger. I got no love for McMaster. But this is not the reason to try to remove him from the Trump administration. And this is some really, really dirty politics, as usual, from Sheldon Adelson. We're all supposed to have one vote. Yeah, we both get one vote, except Adelson gets to put in $10, $20, $50 million into politicians' pockets and then tell them what to do about foreign policy. It's sick. It's gross on its face. Okay. Let's go to Al Franken. Unfortunately, there are new allegations about Senator Al Franken. Recently, Leanne Tweeden had come out and said that she had been groped by Senator Al Franken and that he had involuntarily kissed her backstage. And Al Franken has said that he should be investigated for that. Which is a lot more than you could say for Republicans facing similar situations. Okay, now there is a new allegation. Lindsay Menz, a 33-year-old, told CNN in a report published on Monday that Franken, quote, inappropriately touched her in 2010 while posing for a photograph at the Minnesota State Fair. And Menz says about Leanne Tweeden, I don't want to paint my story in the same light as hers. If someone sees that I said something, maybe it would give them the courage to say something too. Then she explains what happens. Menz told CNN that she was at the fair because her father's business was sponsoring a booth. She spent the day taking photos with local elected officials, political candidates, and celebrities, one of which happened to be Franken. As Menz's husband went to take a photo of her and Franken, Menz said the senator pulled her, quote, in really close, like awkward close, and as my husband took the picture, he put his hand full-fledged on my rear. It was wrapped tightly around my butt cheek. So, look, being too close in a picture, I don't know, right? Her description of what happened is clearly unacceptable. So, we don't have to bother explaining why it's unacceptable. But she explains further, it wasn't around my waist, in case you were unclear. It wasn't around my waist. It wasn't around my hip or side. It was definitely on my butt. I was like, oh my God, what's happening? Okay, Menz's husband corroborated the account, noting that Franken, who was a first-term senator at the time, pulled Menz in and pushed his head against her head, and that she had told him immediately after the exchange, he totally grabbed my butt. Okay. Now look, there are disturbing parts of the story on all fronts. Obviously, if these allegations are true, they're deeply disturbing. The Democrats have taken them very seriously and have called for an ethics investigation, as they should. That is correct. Roger Stone tweeted out the day before any of the revelations came out that it was Senator Franken's turn for the hot seat. So how did political operative Republican hatchet man Roger Stone know these allegations were going to come out before they came out? That is a very fair question. Now, that was before Leanne Tweeden's allegations, but now we have Lindsay Menz as well. I don't know their politics, and that's okay. If what they say is true, their politics is absolutely irrelevant, and Franken obviously should go through that investigation, as I've now said several times. And Franken himself says, I take thousands of photos at the state fair surrounded by hundreds of people, and I certainly don't remember taking this picture. I feel badly that Miss Menz came away from our interaction feeling disrespected. So, I'll have to look into it and find out what actually happened. Now, of course, Trump, after the Tweeden situation, had come out with these tweets saying the Al Frankenstein picture is really bad, speaks 1,000 words. Where do his hands go in pictures 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 while she sleeps? And to think that just last week, he continues lecturing anyone who would listen about, he was lecturing anyone who would listen about sexual harassment, respect for women, Leslie Stahl tape. Okay. Speaking of tapes, of course, Donald Trump famously said on tape, confessed, that he grabs women by the genitalia without asking them. So that is clear sexual assault. He also admitted to kissing them without asking them, and that he thought he could get away with it. Not an honest situation where, hey, I thought we were on a date and then it was going well. No, he knows that they are not giving consent, and he attacks them anyway and brags about it afterwards and says they let him get away with it because he's a star. So I'm asking, and by the way, there's not one or two allegations against Donald Trump. There are now 16 credible allegations against Donald Trump. So I'm going to ask a very fair question, and I want you guys to participate here. There's a petition, tytnetwork.com/ethics, and it says this: we support the ethics investigation of Senator Al Franken. We also believe that whatever the consequences of that investigation are, it should be applied 10 times over to President Donald Trump, who has clearly been accused of worse transgressions by many more women. 16 women, some of them have accused him of sexual harassment, many others sexual assault. His own wife alleged in sworn testimony during the divorce proceedings that he had raped her and ripped her hair out while doing it. Later, after the proceedings were over and she was satisfied, she withdrew those charges. You make of that whatever you want. But she's not alone, and there are many women who have told stories about how they were invited for business meetings, and then he would put his hands all over them, and then trap them in a corner of a room once, in one of the instances, and start groping them and try to do further sexual assault. And some of the women got away, and some did not. So if Al Franken is going to be punished and these stories are true, that makes sense. We are not hypocrites about it. We are honest and fair about it. At the same time, if Al Franken gets punished as he should, if these stories are true, why is the president, in a much more important position, have no ethics investigation? Why is there no ethics investigation when there are 16 women with credible allegations saying that he sexually assaulted them? tytnetwork.com/ethics. Can we get a little bit of fairness in here and say, if we are going to apply a certain standard to one group of folks, at a bare minimum, we should apply that same standard to the other side. So if, for example, Al Franken is forced to resign, no problem. President Trump, I assume, will resign the next day. All of these allegations are deeply problematic for Senator Franken, and much more so for Donald Trump, because there's so many more of them, and they are much more vicious. Now, it's not to say that what Senator Franken did, if true, is not a problem. It is a problem. I've now said that 4 or 5 times, right? It is a different level what Donald Trump did when you've already seen the details, you've covered them, they are gruesome. And for so many women, he's a serial sexual assaulter. He has done it over and over again. So at a bare minimum, let us hold them to the same standard. Anything less is not acceptable, Young Turks. Now, you guys are going to think, especially my early behind-the-scenes footage, like, I already went and looked at the comments in the member section. He goes, oh, he's high, he's drunk. I swear to you I'm not. Well, I just tell you if I am.
Yeah.
Right? And so I get goofy in the behind-the-scenes stuff.
What's the need for the butter with this pretzel? This is already super fattening it up. You don't need to put butter on this thing. Why'd they make me do it, Vincent? Why'd they make me do it? Hey, I'm just saying that this is known as the rear end guy. There's no way that every person he knows doesn't call him the rear end guy. I want you guys to see if you could see the lightning bugs. Whoa. Light them up. Light them up. Is it true, Ritzy? I will now watch it later.
Bitsy, this is my cat. You know what his name is? Kiki Cat. Imagine him in this. Hey, Kiki Cat. Kiki Cat. All right, this is Kiki Cat signing out.
Hey Dave, as you can probably see, Skype froze. Frozen crash.
You know, I'm watching a documentary on the Vietnam War, and there was a TV journalist in the middle of some tiny little village in Vietnam doing live TV as the soldiers were burning the Vietnamese huts. And it didn't crash. And that was 1965, and he was in Vietnam.
They'd rather lose to Republicans than have a progressive win with them. That's how dumb the corporate Democrats are.
It's the Democrats who vote to sleep, and at the end of the day, they're the ones who push the right-wing agenda. Most of the people are either unemployed, underemployed, or fucked.
This is why you lost to Trump, you fucking moron. What the fuck is wrong with you?
Whoever wrote that, I'm sure they were typing with one hand and going like this.
The Democrats are dead. The way you feel right now, that's how a chump feels.
Do not freak out.
Young Turks tweets, El Duende Chingon writes in, to be fair, anyone who can string together a coherent thought is mocking Trump's intelligence. Agreed. The Mathematician says Adelson is quietly one of the most dangerous Americans alive, and the fact that we have an administration openly for hire makes him far more dangerous. Look, I think there's a lot of dangerous Americans, and the fact that we allow them to legally bribe our politicians is insane. The defense contractors, incredibly dangerous, because they make money from creating wars where we all die. That is very dangerous, okay? Foster Freeze backed Rick Santorum, and you can go on and on and on with all the different people who back the oil companies make more from money from war because of the instability in the Middle East. A lot of these folks are dangerous. Rex Tillerson would like to make a deal with Russia. He's dangerous. Maybe we should end the private financing so that those folks don't have greater access to the government. That's supposed to be a democracy. All right. By the way, wolf-pack.com, okay? right, they're doing a fundraiser, wolf-pack.com/wedding, and if you want to get money out of politics, that's how you do it. Otherwise, we can't fix anything. Okay, Megan says, please make the Trump dope graphic a t-shirt or a hat or something. It is epically awesome. Thank you, and we probably will. So thanks for the suggestion. And then we'll probably put it as part of the 10 days of sale, Black Friday sale at shoptyt.com. So I was wearing my impeach shirt earlier today. It's the second time I've put this in the wrong place. All right. So check it out at shoptyt.com. All right. Let's move on to a great story that we broke. Okay. TYT Investigates has broken another story of great import that gives you a sense of how the people in Washington get rich off of us. Now, Alex Kane and Matt Cunningham reporting here that TYT has learned that the brother of White House Office of Management and Budget Director Mick Mulvaney, an architect of the GOP tax plan, is a portfolio manager for the secretive investment arm of Apple Incorporated, which under the tax plan stands to gain a bigger windfall than any other company. That is literally true. I'll share the numbers with you in a second. So who is this brother of Mick Mulvaney? Let's find out. Mulvaney's brother Ted has been a portfolio manager for Browburn Capital, Apple's wholly owned investment firm, for at least 10 years. According to previous reporting about Brayburn, during that period, he and his wife donated $24,900 to his brother Mick's 4 congressional campaigns. Now, look, he gives money to his brother's campaign. I don't think a lot of people are surprised by that. Now, if there's no quid pro quo, no problem at all. And now, we at least have the appearance of a conflict of interest here, where his brother then helps to pass a tax plan, which is going to give him a lot more money to invest in his company and potentially make his brother a lot more money. So to give you a sense of the scale here, according to a 2013 report by The Guardian, Brayburn manages the profits that Apple reports through its Irish subsidiaries. Now that's really relevant because what Mulvaney is engineering is a repatriation tax holiday, in essence, so that you could take the money from things like the Irish subsidiaries and bring them back into America at a lower rate and save billions of dollars, which Brayburn would be involved with and then would later invest some of the proceeds as well. And a local Apple Incorporated subsidiary, Brayburn is responsible for investing Apple's $200 billion of cash. It's actually over that number. So we're talking about a lot of money here that is at stake. Now, it is convenient if your brother is the one making the plans that will get you some more of that money. Now, does Mick Mulvaney, though, really know what his brother does? Maybe he does. They show up at Thanksgiving, but they don't really know what they're up to, right? Yeah. In a May 2017 C-SPAN interview, Mick Mulvaney referred to his brother Ted and said he, quote, manages money for Apple Computer. So the budget director is perfectly aware of what his brother does and how much he would stand to gain from the plan that Mick Mulvaney is pushing today. So, well, let's then ask the next question. Is Mulvaney really that involved in the GOP tax plan? Well, we go to Kane and Cunningham's reporting here again. From the outset, Mick Mulvaney has been a key driver of the GOP tax plan, reportedly saying that he was one of the 3 members of the Trump administration, alongside Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin and National Economic Council Director Gary Cohn, tasked with developing the tax plan. So he's the one who's actually creating the tax plan. Well, that is awfully convenient. But is it really about repatriation, allowing Apple to bring this money back from the Irish subsidiaries and other places that they have? Well, Mick Mulvaney said it is about, quote, corporate tax reform, individual tax reform, and how do you repatriate earnings overseas? So crystal clear. So how much does Apple stand to gain from this? According to a new Public Citizen report, the GOP tax plan would let Apple repatriate an estimated $252.3 billion in overseas earnings to the U.S. at a tax rate of 12%. Apple would save an estimated $47.1 billion, the most of any corporation. And that money very likely goes right back for Ted Mulvaney to invest further. Once again, incredibly convenient. So, now, what is their excuse for all this? The White House spokesperson says, quote, the conflict laws do not extend to broad government matters affecting a large and diverse group of the public, such as corporate tax reform. Further, there is no real or apparent conflict of interest between an employee's duties and the financial interests of a sibling's employer. So, in other words, we're giving all the rich people tax cuts and all the giant corporations tax cuts, so Mick Mulvaney's brother happens to be a direct beneficiary of this. So are all the other rich people. Not that great an excuse. And yes, I believe that it is a conflict of interest. Look, TYT Investigates just finds out the facts and reports on them. Now, as I describe the report to you, my opinion is that Apple is not any more evil than any other corporation. They're not evil or good. They are amoral. They are a corporation. They're a machine. They're a robot. They're not a person. And that machine will do whatever it takes to maximize profit. Will they do a lot of lobbying to get money into the pockets of politicians? Yes, they will definitely do that and have done that at a significant scale. And TYT Investigates has covered that as well. Do other corporations also do it? Absolutely. From time to time, do some of those corporations employ the family members of the people that are coming up with these plans at the government? Yes, and this is one of those instances. These machines will do whatever it takes to maximize profit. When we allow, as American citizens, corporations to have constitutional rights, natural rights, endowed by their creator, inalienable rights, and the right to free speech, which we now say is the right to give money to politicians, this will happen over and over and over again. So this is yet another instance of it. If you want to stop it, you have to stop the private financing of elections. Otherwise, this won't be the last time by a long shot. And we know that it doesn't create jobs. That's another series that TYT Investigates has done, where Apple, for example, said they were going to create new jobs in America. Tim Cook didn't say that, but they said that they would start new manufacturing. Well, TYT Investigates looked into whether they did, and it turns out there is no such permit, and there are no plans for expansion to create more jobs in America. So, no, this is simply to get more money into the pockets of their shareholders and their executives. And so, it's one thing to be honest about that. It's another thing to say, oh, sure. New investments in America. Wonderful job creators in Kentucky, maybe. Not so much. But will some people get rich? Yes. Apparently the brother of the budget director will get fabulously wealthy and David King Johnson is an expert in the field. He covers these financial issues, and he's the founder of BC Report. Here's what he said about this specific issue. It's the job of people like Mick Mulvaney's brother to engineer the interest without running afoul of tax rules. It's yet another example of how fundamentally broken our tax system is. The Trump plan will only make things worse by effectively, retroactively cutting taxes on Apple's profits. I know why the corporations want to do it. As much as it is deeply troubling to the rest of us, it is a logical thing for them to try to cut their taxes to the bare minimum. What I don't know is why we allow it. They have shifted the tax burden away from corporations and onto us, the American citizens. Corporate taxes used to pay for over a third of the budget back in 1952. Now it is 10% and shrinking, and this will make it nearly minuscule. Where did it go? It went to increased payroll taxes, which the poor and the middle class pay. And in fact, the rich don't even pay it after a certain amount. So they shifted the burden of the taxes from corporations to the middle class in America. We should not allow them to do that. You have got to get money out of politics. One group working on that is wolf-pack.com. If you like them and want to help, great. If you don't, and you want to find another group, you want to find a conservative group or progressive group because Wolfpack's nonpartisan, go find them. Start your own group. Do whatever you got to do. But we as citizens cannot allow this fundamental redistribution of wealth out of our pockets and into the pockets of these corporations. If we let them get away with it, They will do it to us over and over. They did it during Bush in 2004, and the last time they did the tax holiday for corporations, by the way, did you get a tax holiday? I didn't get one. But corporations keep getting one almost every decade. The last time they did a tax holiday for this repatriation of cash, the amount of money they spent on lobbyists, they got a 24,000% return on investment. Corporations do not give the politicians out of charity. They do it for a return on investment. The first time they give a corporation, they're taking a gamble on that. When they give to a politician. The second time they give to a politician, it is not a gamble. They have already gotten their return on investment. And now they're back for more. Billions more. Don't let them get away with it. All right. I have another tax story, but we give you guys a lot of tax stories. So you know what? Let me end on Charles Manson. So let's skip ahead to Manson, guys. Okay? Just want to make a quick note about this. Okay. Charles Manson is dead. He was 83 years old. He is a mass murderer. Back when it was a big deal to be a mass murderer. That was back in 1979. And as HuffPost reports, Manson was trying to precipitate a race war. People often forget about that. But he was deeply racist and then put a swastika on his forehead, too. He was trying to precipitate a race war when he ordered his followers to kill 7 people, including Sharon Tate, a pregnant actress married to famed director Roman Polanski. I want to just make 2 quick points about this. First of all, he originally got death penalty, and so did his co-conspirators. But then, when the Supreme Court overruled the death penalty for some period of time, their convictions became life sentences. So, some people who were fair of the death penalty says, oh, it's not good enough for them to rot in jail. Well, Manson rotted in jail for decades and decades. And, you know, the ravings of a lunatic mind in a room by himself, going around and around and around. What they did was horrific. But that is a pretty significant punishment, and I am super glad that he got it. So sometimes there is something worse than the death penalty. And he obviously did not belong out in the free world, so I'm glad that he served his last days in prison. And I think we did the right thing by putting him in prison for life. But I wanted to also make a second point. Everybody knows Charles Manson. Everybody talks about Charles Manson nonstop. There's even, as you know, of course, Marilyn Manson is named partly after Charles Manson and partly after Marilyn Monroe. I mean, he's in pop culture nonstop. Because, oh my God, 7 people died! Well, that's now become commonplace. So you know some of the other names of the people who did worse massacres in America. You might not remember all of them. And we certainly don't talk about them at the great magnitude that we do with Manson. But I want to give you some numbers. Between 1982, so we try to go back to 1969 when these murders happened, but there's the data back to 69 is not as reliable. So let's just stick to 1982 to 2017. And there have been 38 incidents where 7 or more people were killed. So all 38 of those folks are not as famous as Charles Manson. You want to know why? Because back then, it was a big deal to kill 7 people. That was a gigantic deal. Now, we've kind of become accustomed to it. Here, before I show you the names, and we don't like to show the names, but I wanted to give it to you in this context because Charles Manson is so famous. Do you remember who did the Orlando shooting? Do you remember his name? Maybe some of you do, and maybe some of you don't. Do you even remember the guy who just did the Texas First Baptist Church shooting? Do you remember the name of the Virginia Tech shooter? Do you remember the name of the Sandy Hook shooter? You know why? Because we're now used to mass shootings. We're now used to massacres. That's what they are. They're massacres. So I'll just remind you of some of the more famous ones. Devin Kelly was the guy who did the Texas First Baptist Church killing, 26 dead. Stephen Paddock did the Las Vegas shooting, 58 dead. Omar Martin did the Orlando shooting, 49 dead. Dylan Roof also wanted to start a race war. Did the Charleston shooting, 9 dead. Adam Lanza did Sandy Hook, 27 dead. James Holmes did the Aurora Theater shooting in Colorado, 12 dead. Sung Hui Cho did the Virginia Tech Massacre, 32 dead. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold did Columbine, 13 dead. The reason I give you this story is because I don't want us to get used to the massacres. It should be a giant event. It should be something extraordinary. Unfortunately, in today's America, it has become far too ordinary. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, unfortunately, there is a ceaseless torrent of sexual harassment and assault cases. And I say unfortunately because we find out the depths of the problems. And I think we as a society and here at the Young Turks are going to have some uncomfortable conversations around it because it's important and necessary. We're going to do that in the case of Russell Simmons and Brett Ratner when we come back, and also Glenn Thrush, the New York Times reporter. We'll be right back. I have 5 minutes. Explain the Facebook. Go.
Aaron Wysocki, the commander of the armies of the East.
So for those who Aaron is actually Jank's favorite employee.
Aaron, what do you like better? The rabies or the rabies? Go. Aaron, I want to do a YouTube live clip, but not live. Go. Hi, Aaron. I'm confused. Is it Cenk Wagner or Cenk Uger? Go.
What I think a lot of people at TYT, and certainly in the audience, don't know is that without Aaron, none of this happened.
Yeah, it's all because of me.
So, Aaron, what would you do to surface the Young Turks, as they say?
Well, the first thing I did around that is we didn't have a video podcast back in those days. It was only a audio version, and I wanted I wanted to watch it at work in video form, so I just created the video podcast. So this is the free version of the video podcast that still exists today. I created that from scratch. So I would take the YouTube clip and rip it illegally back then off of YouTube and just put it up on iTunes.
What were the things you did to popularize the Young Turks?
So one of the very early things that I liked was not necessarily the show, it was Jank's blogs. I really enjoyed reading those blogs, and I wanted to share them as widely as possible. So at the time, there was a big wave of what they called social bookmarking back then. And so what it meant was like you pull links from, this is Reddit. What Reddit is today, it was much more popular back then, and there were many different websites.
It wasn't until just a couple years ago when Jank and I were traveling together, we would share a hotel room.
Yeah.
2 grown men sharing a little hotel room. I was like, how much longer do we have to do this?
You're going to be in there much longer?
No, seriously. I'm like, oh, geez, he's in the bathroom again. So I have to go downstairs and use the lobby bathroom. Like that kind of stuff. Like that's the kind of family that we had, right? I mean, but I think
that was such a smart decision, though, because you know what it did? You found people that were dedicated to the company, and in a startup, in those early days, you need to find people like that.
Absolutely.
Back at the Young Turks, Jen, Grace, and Brett with you guys today. So, guys, before we get to the depressing stories of today,
How many?
Yes, there's literally so many we couldn't keep up. Canbor and Rose didn't make the cut, but it's amazing. All right, let me read some tweets for you guys. Sean Ferrer says, Jesus, who even pretends to think they're not buying the votes at this point? The American government is for sale for the highest bidder, and spoiler alert, it ain't people who won the bidding war. No. The reason that the working poor and the middle class are going to get tax increases is because you guys don't have lobbyists. Okay. Matthew Reed says, Republicans use language that confuses people. They don't ever tell you that tax raise always puts more money in the pockets of the rich. In fact, this next tax plan, the one that already passed the House, 80% of the money goes to the top 1%. 80%. No, they're not going to admit that. The nonpartisan groups that looked into it will tell you that that's the case, but the Republicans don't want you to know that. But apparently you found out because it's polling really, really badly. All right, member shout-outs are Adam Vargas and Shannon Bale. Thank you guys. You guys allow us to be independent media. We appreciate it. And we got a post-game for you guys today. Later in the week, we have Old School. We had a great episode of Old School last week with me, Ben, Steve, and Mark Thompson. Please check that out if you remember. I had an interview with Reza Aslan, which I thought was really interesting this morning. Members get to see the interviews live, and you'll also have it up for you, of course, later. So tytnetwork.com/join to become a member. All right, Grace, what's next?
All right, we have a pretty heavy second hour, but I will guide you through it. So let's just start off with a new report from the Los Angeles Times. On Sunday, the Los Angeles Times published a comprehensive report that details new allegations of sexual misconduct and abuse by Russell Simmons and Brett Ratner. Now, the report is about 13 pages in length. It's very long, but I'm going to walk you through it. It centers around the accusations of a model, Carrie Clausen-Kaligi, who is 17 years old at the time. She tells her story about how she went back to the apartment of the Def Jam recording mogul Russell Simmons to take a look at what he and Brett said was a music video. Then she says, quickly, Simmons began making aggressive sexual advances, yanking off her clothes, Kaligi said. I looked over at Brett and said, help me, and I'll never forget the look on his face, she recalled. In that moment, the realization fell on me that they were in it together. Now, for his part, Russell Simmons has vehemently denied these allegations. He has cited all the work that he's put in for women's advocacy and his involvement in the #MeToo campaign. He also released a statement which said, in part, in a statement, Simmons, 60, strongly disputed her account. Everything that occurred between Carrie and me occurred with her full consent and participation, he said. Much of the 2 days and one night he spent with her, he said, was with other people or in public. Ratner had no recollection of Kaligi asking him for help and denied witnessing her protest, his attorney Martin Singer said. Now, this comes on the heels of many women coming forward and speaking about their own allegations of abuse by Brett Ratner. And what the Los Angeles Times report breaks down is how they see that Ratner was surrounding himself with other powerful Hollywood players that were complicit in his abuse and sometimes even participating. They say, in several of the accounts, the women said that Ratner, 48, surrounded himself with powerful friends, including Simmons and filmmaker James Toback, who, while sharing Ratner's Playboy lifestyle, have also been accused of engaging in sexual misconduct. Those friendships, some women said, enabled inappropriate behavior within the group, sometimes by active participation and in other cases by simply providing venues for incidences to take place. There's a number of things that come up. They have a whole bunch of different women that speak on the record about their own experiences with these men. Some of this stuff is just coming out from their own words. So, for example, in 2007, in Russell Simmons' book, he talks about his relationship with Brett Ratner, saying, in part, after he hung around a bit and figured out that I liked models, then he made it his business to take me to every model's apartment he could find. Then there's also a 2005 Playboy article where Simmons left the table where he was talking with the interviewer, and then it came to light night that when he left the table for about an hour, it was to engage in sex with a model who Ratner had just had sex with. So there are all these stories that the Los Angeles Times breaks down, a number of women speaking on the record, and then just to walk you through it again before I get a response from you all, Simmons' attorney has said, Simmons' attorney has provided a signed statement from Simmons' former assistant Anthony McNair, who said he saw Kaligi go to Simmons' bedroom on her own volition without any coercion or undue influence. McNair said the group also went out to a nightclub later that evening. McNair said he saw Kaligi at Simmons' house the next day, an assertion affirmed by Simmons, and did not notice any visible signs of distress or anything improper that had occurred. Now, Kaligi retorts, saying that she did not see anyone but Simmons or Ratner at Simmons' home and did not recall being there the next day. The Times could not reach McNair for comment. She also, after the Times published the story about Ratner, she reached out to him and told him that she was going to publicly tell her story, that she was considering that. She urged him to disclose his past behavior. He called her, she said, and they spoke for 27 minutes, according to phone records reviewed by the Times. Simmons said he did not deny any of the claims. Instead, he apologized, mentioning that he is now a father of 2 daughters. So that is sort of the spark notes of what is detailed in this Los Angeles Times account. You guys read it through. What was your response?
So let's separate out the issues. So there's Brett Ratner, who there is a lot of credible allegations against, including in the last set of stories and this set of stories. This story is ostensibly about Russell Simmons, at least that's the headlines. But when you read it, there's far more cases about Brett Ratner. And so those allegations look incredibly credible, okay? So Ratner is and should be in a world of trouble. Now, Russ Simmons and Ratner hung out together. That by itself doesn't prove anything, okay? On the other hand, the allegations by Kaligi are disturbing, to say the least. And look, whenever there's any kind of bias or conflict of interest, I try to be transparent about it. I know Russell Simmons a tiny bit. He's been on the show a couple of times. I've been on panels with him. I like him. I don't know anything about this, right? And as what happened with Cosby, I liked his work, and Russell Simmons did Run DMC and Beastie Boys and Public Enemy, and that's 3 out of the top, 5 favorite things that I grew up to. And so I'm telling you that in an effort to get past it, okay? So the assistant saying she came back later. Well, that actually happens a lot. It is logical for people to think, oh, well, that must mean that she liked him. No, not necessarily the case at all. That's part of the power dynamic here, is that a lot of women and sometimes men feel that if they don't do as they're told, their careers are going to be absolutely ruined. So, yes, sometimes they show up the next day. And in this case, we don't even know if she showed up the next day. That's just what the assistant is saying. And in the case of Ratner, there's another story in this long LA Times story about a woman who then, after Ratner brushed up against her and made inappropriate comments and physical actions, she wrote him a nice note. But Anita Hill wrote a nice note to Clarence Thomas. Many women write nice notes later because they're afraid that they're going to lose their careers. And also, it's not just that. It's that they feel like, oh, am I doing the wrong thing by challenging them? And is everybody going to say that I'm a poor sport, or 1,000 different pressures here? So if the allegations are true in the case of Kaligi, and right now, unlike Ratner, this appears to be the sole claim against Russell Simmons. As with these stories, you never know if that's how it's going to wind up. But if they're true, they're devastating.
Brett, let's get your input.
I watched the news lately, similar to the way I watched The Walking Dead, just to see which one of my heroes will turn out to be like a soulless, blood-sucking creep. In Walking Dead, they turn into zombies. In the news, my heroes turn out to be sexual predators. And it's so devastating, and I totally get it. I think an important part is for people who look up to certain folks, as you can't not. There's going to be people you look up to. For me, it's Al Franken and Louis C.K. And then you hear these stories, you read these stories, and you think to yourself, it's okay to have that first reaction of, it's unavoidable to have that first reaction of, I love that person. Oh my God, I watched every episode of The Cosby Show. That was like my TV dad. But you have to kind of compartmentalize it, as you hear that a lot of victims have to compartmentalize the feelings they have surrounding an event like this and try to figure out what actually happened. I think something important with the Khaligian one, or whatever, I don't know how to Khaligi, is this part. Did you read the part about the lawyer, what the lawyers have said afterwards? There's this part in the article where the expose or whatever you want to call it, where there's this moment where years later Russell Simmons approaches Khaligi and they talk about the incident, and they don't give specifics about what was apologized for, but there was some kind of apology, and there was like a hug, one said. But then, and it seems like they're working towards some kind of solution between the two of them, but then the lawyers come in with a statement. And the statement is things like, now, however, I guess maybe it's Ratner. There's one where Ratner, and there's another one with Simmons' lawyer, where it's like they never heard any alleged, or they basically say that there was never. I don't know. They kind of equivocate and say this is not an admission of guilt, and that's what's frustrating. Is that the lawyers have been able to identify exactly the power structures in place that keep certain bits of evidence from coming into any potential legal case. And you hear all these guys say, well, I've grown a lot as a person, and I was in a really tough place back then. But they never really want to take full responsibility, and they definitely don't want to suffer any kind of legal consequence. And so they want this like hug at the whatever it is Soho house to mean something, but the lawyers step in and are like, but it can't be any like legal consequence that they suffer. That's something that's frustrating for me.
Well, yeah, I mean, and you can understand why. If it is true, and he admits it, there probably are legal consequences, and so his lawyer is going to tackle him and say, don't do that. I'm not saying that that's right. I'm just telling you what a lawyer is going to do. And look, it's just, these are all super hard because, they say we believe the women is now a saying, right? And I want you to understand what that means. It's a little bit like Black Lives Matter. It doesn't mean that no other lives matter, right? It means Black Lives Matter as well. And we believe the women doesn't mean that every woman is always telling the truth in every case. It means, generally speaking, we're now at a state in our society where all those charges that we didn't believe, we brushed under the rug, and didn't give credit to, it turns out they were largely right, okay? It doesn't mean that you believe every single woman. Of course, there's a case in Virginia that Rolling Stone got in so much trouble for, where a woman had made up allegations, and they investigated, and it turned out it wasn't true. And we have a criminal justice system where we don't just believe people, we go through a process. But the phrase does mean something, which is, in the past, they were largely not believed. And in reality, about 2% of cases, statistically, are not true. 98% are true. And
what we're talking about is empowering people who have been powerless, whose voices did not matter for so long. And now, because of what has swayed in the wake of the Harvey Weinstein piece, now these women are feeling emboldened to come forward. Or I don't even want to say these women, these people are coming forward, because just later we're going to be talking about Terry Crews. But for years, there was this, in Hollywood and in other industries as well, as we will also discuss, there was this insane power dynamic where these people at the top just wielded such influence that people felt powerless to come forward, or they felt powerless to voice how they truly felt a situation went down. And that is crystal clear in this Los Angeles Times piece, because they also talk with the actress Sarah Shahi, who talks about her experience with Brett Ratner that she felt was inappropriate, but that she also felt like she had to keep up a good relationship with him because of his power in Hollywood. And then, Brett and I were talking before we went to tape about how do you reconcile that? Like, should she have called him out earlier, or what?
But that's what we believe the woman means, because back then it was really, really, really hard to come out because people wouldn't believe you. And back then it was like, 2 months ago. So now you're getting an avalanche of these stories because there's almost like a sense of relief from women who have held this back for so long, finally going, oh, I can say it and somebody will believe me.
And she says, I was trying to be a smart businesswoman. This is Sarah Shahi. By keeping the lines of communication open, I played the Hollywood game like every other actress. And then Ratner's attorney, vehemently denies this, saying that, she was very flirty. These overwhelming contradictions make the claims inherently improbable is what he says to her part. But I think that what we hear from these actresses, especially that are coming forward, is like, this was the territory. This is what you had to do to get work.
Right. It's like all these wide-eyed models who, when they were 17, they came to Los Angeles and they had these dreams of making it as a model or an actress. Like, in my opinion, from what I've read, and this is just my speculation, Brett Ratner wasn't dreaming of coming, to Hollywood just to be the director. He was dreaming about having these interactions, getting to a point where he had like the jet and the fancy house where he'd get women into his place, and he was going to design it here, and there'd be a jacuzzi there, and he'd have all these women over. And since he became Brett Ratner, he was going to have this. Another weird part of it is like now I'm reading into like his father issues that he had. All of this and
the role that Russell Simmons played in that dynamic.
Russell Simmons, you had various other hanging out with Roman Polanski was like a father figure of his, and you know the stories behind that. And there was another prominent executive that ran Paramount. Yeah, and I get it. And there's all these things happening, but it really frustrates me when I see things like Russell Simmons saying he has found peace now. It's like, well, that's the most selfish approach. I'm glad you've found peace. But, think about all the stuff you put maybe not him, but, generally the entire dynamic is this has created a very weird place for people to have to handle the lay of the land. And you find yourself saying, well, me anyways, I find myself saying the most pure-souled person is the one who sees this injustice and says, no, I have to stop it immediately. That's a really tough place to put someone in. And then I find myself saying someone who waited until a moment when they had a little power, even though they benefited. For me, it's Tig Notaro. Tig Notaro is the one who made this Louis C.K. thing kind of happen, one of the very few. But she wouldn't have been able to make the difference unless she had gotten Louis C.K. to produce some of her stuff. And so she benefited, I guess, in a certain way, but then she becomes the one who is now big enough to say something that gets more people to do the research. Combined with the Gawker article, finally the New York Times says it. So she didn't speak out. I guess people like her haven't all spoken out immediately, but when they do get some power, I just don't know where to draw the line, and I find we all need a PhD in ethics math at the end of this because we have so many data points on what kind of perv you can be in America.
Well, but look, nuance matters, and so that's why I'm trying to constantly give context. So the last piece of context here. For Ratner, if he wanted to have the Hollywood lifestyle and have the jacuzzi and the girls, he shares that with almost every guy in the country. That's totally different than the descriptions that many of these women give, including Jamie Young, who says she was 21, she's at his mansion in Hollywood, and then he corners her in a room, won't let her leave, starts groping at her, and then takes out his penis and does what he has apparently done with Olivia Munn, etc. And he tries to get her to touch it, she won't, and finally he masturbates. So this is something that many women have accused Ratner of. That is, I hope, not in the dreams of the young kids who are trying to get the jacuzzi in Hollywood.
But I think it's the same. It's just he had this dream, and I think that dream is inherently sexist. The dream that I will have money and power, which will translate to women in bikinis under a Hef's waterfall. That is inherently sexist because it implies that women are attracted to money and power, and that's just not. I don't think that's a nice thing to do. Whether it's true or not, I'm sure there are women who are attracted to that, and I'm sure he had success with certain women, and then he comes along women who had a good relationship with their father or whatever, and they finally say no. But I don't know. I feel like Brett Ratner didn't start off with the first woman when he got his first director's gig and had him up to his hotel room and whipped out his junk, and when she said no, started masturbating in front of her. I think he, over time, honed this sick trap that he lured a lot of people into, and he got better at it and more confident in it, and he became more Brett Ratner than he was before, and he got to a point, but it started with that. First you get the money, then you get the power,
Yeah, and the last thing on Russell Simmons is that what Grace read to you was from Touré, who had interviewed him back in 1994. Not about the Kaligi thing, but about how Brett Ratner apparently was done with a girl, and Russell Simmons went up and also had some sort of relationship with her. No one is alleging that was not consensual. So, if it was consensual, that's their business. And I don't want to get into the business of overly judging people's sex lives, because we're not those people. We're not the evangelical pastors and hypocrites, etc., getting into people's sex lives and telling them what to do and what not to do. We only care about stuff that is non-consensual or creates, a work environment where there's sexual harassment and it's hostile, etc. So far, the only charge against Russell Simmons is the one from Kaligi. And sometimes there could be a misinterpretation. She thought it wasn't consensual. He thought it was. I don't know if that's what they're going to claim. But to be clear, she says she fought it wildly, so that there should not have been any mistake as to what went down. And so eventually she says she acquiesced to oral sex because she felt like she had no choice in getting out of that situation. So I want to be as clear as we can on the facts presented.
Yeah, it's pretty unsettling stuff. And we're actually going to be staying with Russell Simmons for this next story. Deals with Terry Crews as well. So after Terry Crews slams Russell Simmons on Twitter after Russell Simmons sends him an email asking him to sort of take it easy on the agent Adam Bennett, who Terry Crews has accused of groping him at a party. So in the email that he posted to his Twitter, it's from Russell Simmons with just the subject line, agent, reading, did he ever apologize? Give the agent a pass. Ask that he be reinstated. With great love, all things are possible. Terry Crews then tweeted, message Russell Simmons sent me regarding my sexual assault case against Adam Bennett of WME. Dear at Uncle Rush, no one gets a pass, in all caps. And what I think is interesting, I found this quote with regards to the emotional intelligence that Terry Crews displayed, saying, quote, the email Simmons purportedly sent Crews is more evidence of the dark side. By asking Crews to, quote, give the agent a pass, it sends the message that a weak apology is sufficient to alleviate any severe emotional pain and suffering experienced by the victim. It also implies that excusing this type of behavior is somehow taking the high road, but that couldn't be further from the truth. That message has since become complicated by new and disturbing allegations against Simmons himself, which you can check out our discussion of that in another TYT video. Now, just to give you guys up-to-date context on what's going on, Variety reported on November 3rd that Mr. Bennett was on leave as the agency looked into the actor's accusations, but Mr. Crews had not publicly identified Mr. Bennett until Wednesday. Mr. Crews, who had been represented by WME but not by Mr. Bennett, personally left the agency last week. Mr. Bennett represented some of Hollywood's most well-known actors, including Emma Stone, Adam Sandler, Sylvester Stallone, Michael B. Jordan, Dustin Hoffman, and Eddie Murphy. So what was your reaction when you saw Terry Crews taking this private email correspondence to Twitter? I personally thought this was incredibly bold and awesome for calling him out. No one gets a pass.
Yeah, I'm not sure I thought it was awesome. And I'll tell you a couple of distinctions here. So first off, of course it shouldn't matter between male and female victims. But I think what it is that there's little different standards between not male or female, but thick skin versus thin skin. And I'm not saying that to disparage people who have thin skin. I'm just saying that people have different reactions. As I was reading this story, because the guy grabbed him from the front, okay? We've covered stories in the past here where a couple of guys here have been grabbed from the back. And I remember, I told a story in one of our post games for the members about the Cuban guy who grabbed me in the middle of a melee in Elian Gonzalez, and I was amused by it. I didn't care. A couple other guys here have been grabbed, and then I realized as I was reading Terry Crews thing, I remember someone once grabbed me from the front, but I cared so little about it that I don't even remember who it was, and I just thought it was kind of weird, but he had done it jokingly or something, and I was like, well, that's super weird, and I moved on with my life. So I tell you that because I've got thick skin, and so if someone says, hey, Jank, maybe let it go, I would take that as a private correspondence and his opinion that I should, and I wouldn't be intimidated by it if I didn't want to let it go. I'd tell him to piss off, right? Because I have the benefit of having the privilege of being secure and confident and in a decent place in my life and my career where I can make those decisions, and I'm not intimidated by anybody. But I actually think that it, like saying that it's so, like, moving on, I'm saying they should be left up to the victim. And Terry Crews doesn't want to move on, so there's nothing wrong with that at all. But if someone did want to move on, I also think there's nothing wrong with that.
Right, but it's not Russell Simmons' place to then come say, hey, give this guy a pass. Did he apologize? Ask that he be reinstated. Terry Crews said that he felt the most emasculated in his life by the groping incident that Adam Bennett, by what happened and transpired by him and Adam Bennett, and Adam Bennett's subsequent response was just laughing in his face. I think that it was wildly inappropriate for Russell Simmons to insert himself into this, because how you feel when you have been groped is totally different, and you can't sort of project that onto how other people should feel.
That's actually my point. I just want to be clear about that. That's actually my point, which is that you have to remember that not everybody thinks like you do. Because just because I'm thick-skinned doesn't mean everybody else is thick-skinned.
And it's still a fireable offense. It's a wildly awful, inappropriate behavior by Adam Bennett to someone that is at his agency at a party with his wife there. So he shouldn't be given a pass. That's bad. Don't do that. You struck out, Adam Bennett.
I was ragging my mind around this sexual harassment thing, and the sexual harassment, I talked to someone in law enforcement, and they said that there's a lot that goes into it, of course, but one is their working relationship, and then where it happened, and then a bunch of other things. But the working relationship has the most effect on it. So in this situation, what was the working relationship between Terry Crews and Adam Bennett? Was it his agent?
Not his agent.
But so then it's just some guy at that point. And we're all loosely related in the production process, but it wasn't at a meeting. It wasn't in anything like that. I think the thought that I can't tell Terry Crews what to do or think. If it was me, I've been in situations where I knew that someone was acting inappropriately, and I was like, I can handle this. It's not a big problem for me. My priority would be I want to help the discussion. The discussion would probably be, in my opinion, would be best served by kind of a 10,000-foot view, since Terry Crews is so accomplished. Unless this was a serial offender who has offended a lot of people, it would be nice to have the discussion. Definitely, if a name is dropped, it's the name of Adam Bennett, the person who did it. To bring Russell Simmons into it seems like a little outside. Another qualifying factor would be what's the relationship between Terry Crews and Russell Simmons? If they're really close friends and you've had a good relationship, and my friend sends me this email, especially with no punctuation, I would think it sounds like a friend's email, sort of, because there's no punctuation, but then with this weird, I'm going to gag with great love, all things are possible.
I think he writes that all the time.
Right. I will also say, but it's so connected. I don't know. That's one of those things where, if I like Russell Simmons, you're right. With great love, all things are possible. But if someone's been pulling on, if you want to, destroy his sweater and you just pull the string as he walks away, then he is now an evil person, and I hate him because he says things like, with great love, all things are possible. I found peace because I have 2 daughters now.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's tough.
Okay, so again, let's be clear here, and context matters.
Yeah.
No one thinks that what Adam Bennett did to Terry Crews is okay. Nobody thinks that, right? So now, earlier I said I have thick skin. If somebody had done it to me, I don't encourage it and don't do that. And I might have a different opinion, later if it happened to me. But I'm saying that's up to Terry Crews to decide, and he was not okay with it. So Adam Bennett should never have done that. That's obvious. That's clear. That part is easy. I think the harder part is the Russell Simmons part, where it's a private correspondence and Terry Crews is putting it out there. That's where context matters a lot. Because if Terry doesn't know Russell at all, and Russell's all of a sudden and Russell knows Adam Bennett, and they have business together, and he writes him hey, be cool, well, that's a different thing, right? Mm-hmm. On the other hand, if Russell Simmons and Terry Crews know each other well, and then if I know 2 guys and I step into the middle not having anything to do with work, right? And I'd be like, hey guys, you sure you can't work this out? All of a sudden I'm a bad guy and somebody's going to send that email out. You see what I'm saying?
Right, but what I would say back is, then it sounds like he's just showing up and be like, hello, Russell Simmons is in the room, and I produce a lot of stuff.
And I'm saying, I ask a question, but regardless of the answer, I say, did he ever apologize? Then right into give the agent a pass, ask that he be reinstated. Like, if I care a lot, I don't know, I'm not Russell Simmons, obviously, I'm not Russell Simmons, but, you know, like, write more words. Write a thoughtful email as opposed to, like, 3 things, one of which is a question you don't wait for the answer for. The next 2 are directives on how to get this guy a pass.
Well, furthermore, I think that why this sort of resonated with me is that, you know, Russell Simmons is incredibly powerful in so many industries. And I look at this as Terry Crews sort of speaking truth to power and calling this out, especially when we think about Russell Simmons' relationship to Brett Ratner, who had, you know, and his history of sexual abuse. I wonder how Russell Simmons has thought of those. Like, oh, give him a pass. Did he apologize? I understand why Terry Crews chose Russell Simmons to call out. Like, we cannot give sexual predators a pass. I understand that connection, and I think that, you know, Twitter is the forum that everyone, our world leaders, are using to announce policy. And if this is going to be the new policy in Hollywood, I understand why Terry Crews chose that platform.
I would also say that, like, this is the difficult discussion what we're having now. I know for a fact that in the first 20 minutes of the show, I've said things that I won't stand by. I mean, I'll stand by it because of where I was at the time. But this is all in the service of trying to wrap your head around, and I feel like that's where everybody is now. There's just so much noise and so many accusations. I saw a rundown of accusations and people who have suffered consequences and resigned, and I knew a bunch of them. Like, I've worked with a bunch of them. I'm like, oh my God, that's ridiculous. And I'd never heard, some of them I'd heard rumors about, but others I hadn't. And that's what's so difficult. And I know that in the wake of this, there will be people who upon whom justice is meted out correctly. And I fear that in the wake of this, there will be people who suffer consequences that they do not deserve because for some reason the court of public opinion just went off the rails on them. And that's what's so difficult. And I look at this with the Russell Simmons thing, and this might be one of them. But it also might be true. And we need to remember, we need to take into consideration every aspect of every implication that may have as we have this discussion and before we draw conclusions. And I think that's it.
Yeah. So the last thing for me on this is that context matters. And so if Terry Crews thought that Russell Simmons is trying to intimidate him by sending this message, and then so he wants to then make it public, I totally get it, and I understand. And again, I don't know their relationship. If he knows him and he's taking a private email and throwing him under the bus,
but so central to this is all these weird, secretive discussions guys are having behind the scenes that are making things go away. And this is part of it. So maybe this is a learning moment to say, like, don't send an email to someone that could have an impact because this is a high-profile person in a high-profile case. I'm talking about Terry Crews here, who you're sending an email to. And so he might just say, I want to get it out. I want to get everything out there. So don't send something in that situation that you would be ashamed of leaking. But I totally get it. Like, you put me on blast. I thought we were friends.
Yeah, well, we have to go to a break, but I'm glad we're having these important discussions. I know it's difficult, I know they're lengthy, but I think it's so important to air them out, and I'll be interested to see what people have.
Yeah, and when we come back on the Glenn Thrush story, I think it gets even harder.
I know.
So buckle up and brace for impact. We'll be right back.
Controversial stuff we were discussing prior.
Ready, go!
ethics spread. We need sex ethics ed curriculum for schools, but we don't even teach sex ed yet. Yeah, and the Squirrel Mafia, the well-known Squirrel Mafia, says, please put Grace the Bard Baldridge on more. The news may suck, but she makes the day better.
The Bard?
Sure.
Do you like Shakespeare or something?
Yeah, well, a little bit, because I always say I look kind of like a lesbian Lord Farquaad with my haircut. So that's
really funny.
Probably it.
Okay, I'm not sure I should say that's really funny, but it is.
It is.
Okay.
It's my brand. Ted Cruz and Lord Farquaad had a lesbian daughter, and you all know it's true.
No, I would not go that far. You're crazy. Okay, let's go forward.
All right. Keeping moving. Vox has released a report about bad judgment and sexual misconduct allegations against New York Times White House correspondent Glenn Thrush. This comes from Laura McGann, who is a former colleague at Politico with Glenn Thrush. There's a lot that goes into this report, but basically she calls into question his own advocacy for women in the field of journalism, saying that 5 years ago when Thrush and I were colleagues at Politico, he caught me off guard, put his hand on my thigh, and suddenly started kissing me. Thrush says he recalls the incident differently. She goes on to say 3 young women I interviewed, including the young woman who met Thrush in June, described to me a range of similar experiences, from unwanted groping and kissing to wet kisses out of nowhere to hazy sexual encounters that played out under the influence of alcohol. Each woman described feeling differently about these experiences. Scared, violated, ashamed, weirded out, I was and am angry. Thrush did release a statement to the piece. He said, I apologize to any woman who felt uncomfortable in my presence and for any situation where I behaved inappropriately. Any behavior that makes a woman feel disrespected or uncomfortable is unacceptable. In this interview, there are a lot of different examples, and there are screenshots of text messages sent back and forth, emails as well. 40 people were interviewed in and around the media. The author emphasizes his influence in the world of reporting and media. And then points out how some women had this tricky, confusing relationship with Thrush, where something that they didn't feel comfortable with had happened, and then they would sort of encourage him the next day or try and make him feel better. One of these women says, I hate feeling obligated to make him think I think everything is fine. It's been this thing hanging over me. I feel like I have to be nice to this person just because he knows people. They go on to just talk about just the toxic environment. Now, ending with the behavior attributed to Glenn in this Vox story is very concerning and not in keeping with the standards and values of the New York Times, said Eileen Murphy, the Senior Vice President of Communications for the New York Times, in a written statement. We intend to fully investigate, and while we do, Glenn will be suspended. We support his decision to enter a substance abuse program. In the meantime, we will not be commenting further. So they close with a statement from the New York Times. This follows Glenn saying that he has been seeking alcohol treatment for his substance abuse problems. And that's sort of what we have right now. It is, again, a really detailed report. Please read the full thing. A lot of women are speaking on the record, although many anonymously. I want to get a response from you all on when you read this story.
Yeah. So, by the way, guys, whenever we talk about a story, the link will be in the description box if you're watching on YouTube, and we'll try to put it on Facebook in the comment section. So read the whole story for yourself, because it has a lot of context, and context matters a lot, as we've discussed in all of these issues. So it's easy to lump everybody into the same batch. I don't think they should be in the same batch. So Glenn Thrush is now facing this investigation about potentially sexual harassment. It is not the same as what Weinstein and Ratner and Ailes, etc., were alleged to have done. This is that doesn't mean that it's right. Those are separate conversations, okay? One of the comments that George Bush said drove me crazy. Was he said back in the day, he said, "I don't do nuance." I think it's a terrible thing not to do nuance. So nuance is important, but when you do nuance, it doesn't mean you're excusing the behavior of the people that did something not quite as atrocious as other people. Okay, so now in his case, what are the issues? Some of the women he worked with, including the person who wrote this piece, Laura McGann. So now she did not report to him. He was not her boss. It gets complicated because now the rules are that you are allowed to have relationships at the office if they're not working directly for one another. So if they had a consensual relationship, there's nothing wrong with that. Okay. Now she says it was not consensual in that moment where he put his hand on her thigh and then kissed her without permission. Okay. So if that's the case, that's bad, and there has to be some consequences attached to that, right? I don't know what the consequences should be. I don't know. We're all trying to figure this out together, right? Now, I want to introduce another element here that we should think about, which is if he's trying to kiss women and they don't want to be kissed, I'm not sure that that's a federal offense in the beginning. If he persists, then it's definitely a problem. So where do you draw the line between? So here, I'll give you a personal example. When I was 17, I leaned into 16, leaned in to kiss this girl who we were studying together, and she turned her cheek. I hope that that's not a thing, right? Later, we went on a date for 4.5 years. By the way, just because later something else happened doesn't mean that the relationship. But if we are going to say that every lean in for a kiss is wrong, we're going to have to round up a lot of people. On the other hand, if she clearly does not want it, and you're touching her without her consent and sticking your tongue down her throat, that's a totally different issue. That's why context matters and nuance matters.
Right. A lot of these stories are essentially he got drunk at a thing, and at the end wouldn't let a girl go home in the Uber, and then she wouldn't. They kept trying to kiss her until she started crying, and then was like, "Oh my God, I'm a terrible person. I need to leave." So it seems like he finally, when they start crying, realizes he does bad stuff, but he doesn't recognize leading up to it all the bad things. It also seems like he has a substance abuse problem. It seems to me, and this is just my sniff test, that he actually does have a substance abuse problem, and that it's not just like an excuse for something. But that's not up for me. That's just like my opinion on reading this article. I just think that we do need to take a lot of things into consideration when looking at this, and I completely agree with if there's thing A and thing B, just because you call thing B worse doesn't mean you're calling thing A good.
Yes. And so, and in this case, about the girl who's crying, it's not McGann, it's a different story. And there are multiple stories here. And so, if you want to criticize him for going too far, that is a perfectly legitimate criticism, and the New York Times has suspended him. Further context is, as Brett pointed out, when it got to a point where it was overwhelmingly clear that it was not consensual, and it shouldn't have gotten to that point in the first place, he does then go say, "I'm sorry," and runs away. Unlike the other cases where they sit, like Weinstein saying, "Shut up and stand there and take it," basically, right? He did not do that stuff. So, Grace, I want to come back to you, but we have to take a break, okay? We're going to keep going on the internet. Sorry, radio audience, we love you guys. We'll see you tomorrow, but we're going to keep on going on TYTnetwork.com. right, back on the Young Turks. Cenk, Brett, and Grace. Obviously, we're just talking about the Glenn Thrush story, and I wanted to get Grace's thoughts on this. So, Grace, what do you think?
So I think for me, when I was reading through this Vox piece, ethics, math aside, it was so familiar and unsettling to hear about how women were warning each other about how to, screw my earpiece, how to behave around Glenn Thrush, and they were warning each other. That's something that is very familiar to girls. I mean, I remember this is down in college, there were certain boys that you just knew were too touchy-feely, especially when drinking. So you have this sort of circle of trust among friends, and I'm sure it exists within other circles as well, but I know that feeling, that sentiment. So reading through this, and the text messages that are included, the screenshots where this girl says, "I'm nervous about this Glenn situation," and then her friends are saying, "All right, call an Uber," and just people, checking in on her because again, they knew that he was this way, that he was irresponsible and did not conduct himself in a way that was respectful, and then juxtaposing that with how he says he feels he is towards women, which was when he was confronted with it, he says, "I don't lure anybody ever. I got drunk because I got some shitty health news. I am acutely aware of the hurdles that women face in this business and have spent the better part of 20 years advocating for women journalists." And this comes on the heels of someone just sort of pointing himself, so someone presenting the issue to him, saying like, "Hey, my friend had this incident with you last night. She left in tears. What can I do so that this doesn't happen again?" And then he's just like, "I'm acutely aware of women's issues. I don't know if you know, but I'm a dude.
Right, like,
I know."
Under it, I don't know. I watch a lot of movies, so it's like I feel like when he says you're looking for like this character thing. Like if he was a character in a movie, I would make him the one who, yes, he fights for women, but only the one who make him feel good about himself, make him feel like that big mentor that's giving them a hope in the world. And I don't know what that is, and that's what's so. We talked about this on Pop Trigger. Like, there's a lot of courts we can try people in. We can try them in the criminal court. We can try them in a civil court. We can try them in the court of public opinion, and I assume the basketball court, some kind of trial by combat. Best first 9 wins and doesn't go to jail. But like, they all have their positives and negatives. Like when we think about Roy Moore, like the court of public opinion is much faster. Criminal court's going to take a long time, and he might be well into the Senate before we do that. And there are a lot of people who, like, he, allegedly molested children. So and it seems like a court of public opinion thing, but criminal court is one where there are a lot of people saying what's admissible and what's not, so it's more curated in terms.
days in March 2013. During that time, Lovett gave him dandelion tea and oil of oregano to treat his infection. Something that's sort of interesting about this case, just legally, is that the defense lawyer, Alan Hepner, who had argued the case should be dismissed because it took too long from the time Lovett was arrested until her conviction in January. The Supreme Court of Canada set out a 30-month time frame for superior court cases to go to trial in what has become known as the Jordan decision. The High Court, however, has allowed some flexibility for cases in which charges were laid before its order in July 2016. Lovett's case took 38 months to prosecute. That's sort of a footnote because the core of the story is that this mother was not getting her son the treatment that he so desperately needed. And when you go into the details of what an untreated strep throat looks like, it's just so tragic. It's a tragic way for anyone to pass, but especially for a 7-year-old boy.
Okay, sorry. So I'm curious whether you guys think she should go to jail. So first, let me say that I got a 7-year-old son, and as I read about how he was dying, oh God, it is beyond heartbreaking. He had swollen lymph nodes, oozing ears, and jaundiced eyes at the time of his death, and the infection led to organ failure. Oh God, please get your kids actual medical treatment. If someone tells you, oh, you sprinkle fairy dust on it and whatever insane style, the shamans used to sprinkle oregano on it. I don't care what the shamans did. Get the kid to a hospital. So, on the one hand, I am enraged that she did not get him to a hospital and the poor kid died. Crushing as I read the story. On the other hand, do we think she meant it? I mean, and the judge says that the mother is clearly incredibly remorseful and heartbroken over it. Her son died. I don't know. Can we say that that's punishment enough or no? I don't have the answer here. What do you guys think?
So negligence, right, is different, right? There's an act and there's an intent, but if there's certain cases where you're, negligent, and that carries with it some kind of negative consequence legally. I totally hear you on the, you know what we should do when my kid's sick? Take him to not a doctor. Like, that is what she said. You know, we should use the medicine that was available 1,000 years ago. If you did that with anything else, you'd sound crazy. Like, I need to be at the meeting, so I'm going to get there the way they did 1,000 years ago. It's in New York. I'll see you in 5 months. Just...
Yeah. And stuff like, oh, well, the cavemen ate dirt. Yes, they also died at the age of 13.
Yes.
Right? So don't listen to that coarse crap. Believe in science and doctors.
But I think when you're sentencing the person and you look and you see that they're complete, you hear a statement of remorse. If she is wrecked, which she seems to be because her son died, sending her to prison doesn't bring her son back. I'm not an expert in sentencing, but 3 years is a long time to think about her son in prison, and I still think if she doesn't go to prison, she's going to be thinking about her son for the rest of her life.
Yeah, and it also sort of brings up questions like, okay, is she liable to be a repeat offender? And I wonder, we don't have that information if there are other, children or something like that. But then that also brings up the question, like, well, I would think she has obviously learned her lesson from this, that this wouldn't happen again. And the judge herself acknowledges that she believes that her remorse is genuine. It's a really complicated conversation about ethics, and do you put 3 years behind bars, but then also, you do want the gravity of what took place and but then of course it is. You see that I have these conversations in my head.
I get you.
You go back and forth. You want there to be a punishment because that boy was absolutely punished in his last 10 days of life. I can't think of a worse way to go. But then imagine the guilt that everyone believes is genuine. You say prison.
Yeah, because it's such a selfish thing for her activity. Like, she was holding true to these tenets, or maybe she just was like, you know what? I'm just gonna read, and she watches her kids suffer to death. The things were happening up until his death, and she still was like, you know what, I'd rather use the oregano tea and you're dealing with, when I say things like, well, if she shows remorse, it seems like she's being rational, but these things don't seem rational leading up to it.
I know, jaundiced eyes. I mean, it does bring up the question of, like, at what point do you just say, all right, this tea isn't working? You know, there's sort of a sense of...
But, you know, so, yeah, look, she was horribly irresponsible, and her stupid theories, I get what you're saying about being selfish. My stupid theories are going to prove to be true, and I'm going to test it on my 7-year-old. I couldn't be more upset about the situation. And look, part of our job is to talk about these stories, and hence we in some ways judge them. And you know, and I feel terrible about it. But this is the conversations that I hope helps get us to a better place, so that someone watching this thinks, oh, if my kid's got jaundiced eyes, I need to get him to a doctor, right? So now, having said all that, I think where I come out on, and of course we're not legal experts, and you have to be in the actual courtroom to make this decision, etc. But from an outsider's perspective, I think I would have gone for a heavier sentence that is suspended, so she doesn't go to jail. But if her kid, then, you know, I don't know if she's got other kids, but if they so much as sneeze and she doesn't take him to a doctor, then we're going to have a different conversation. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying?
I get it, yeah. I feel like if you give her 3 years, I don't know, the judge is the one who sits there and, here anyway, sentences. So.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to our last story, kind of medically related, because marijuana is, some people use it for medical reasons.
Yeah.
Sure.
Oil of marijuana.
Yeah. An elderly couple in Pennsylvania is suing police after they allege excessive force was used when their hibiscus plant was mistaken for a marijuana plant. Edward Kramer, 69, and his wife Audrey from Buffalo Township alleged they were handcuffed and forced to sit in a hot police car for hours last month after police arrived looking for drugs. The couple are suing the Buffalo Township Police and the Nationwide Insurance Company over the incident, claiming excessive force, false arrest, false imprisonment, invasion of privacy, and intentional infliction of emotional stress over the incident, according to the Pittsburgh Tribune Review. What happened was the insurance company came to photograph their property after a neighbor's tree had fallen onto their property, and while they were there, they took photos of this hibiscus plant. This is from Nationwide, and then they sent those photos to the police because the Nationwide insurance agent believed the plant to be marijuana, even though this plant had flowers on it. So if you know anything about weed, that's not a thing. Anyway, it's actually a pretty harrowing incident what they went through. Audrey Kramer was in her underwear at the time. She says she felt incredibly violated. She hasn't been sleeping since the incident. And then there's just a final quote from Mr. Kramer. He told his local news network, "Sometimes I think they look for crime where it doesn't exist in order to justify their existence."
Well,
I just thought that was kind of a real zinger from this guy.
Yeah, well, I got news for you. They most certainly do. And it was actually in the beginning to lock up minorities and throughout.
And now it's to cut down on hibiscus.
Yes, well, everybody knows hibiscus is a great gateway drug. Let's break this down. There's a couple different angles here. One is how much I can't stand the Nationwide Insurance Company rep that went there and was like, I'm investigating a fallen tree, but I see something that might resemble marijuana. I will go to the trouble of reporting this to the police so that this 69-year-old can be arrested if they're actually having fun when they're 69. Why don't you fuck off already? Jesus, I mean, you're in their house, you're trying to do the
They already had a tree fall on their property.
Yeah. And this, nosy son of a bitch is in there with the eyes. Is it hibiscus or is it marijuana? Fuck off.
There was a recording and they were like, "Is that marijuana there? Let's call up the police now."
But you know what's also interesting about the Nationwide insurance agent is that really not thorough in their research. Because if it were me and I was even a little uncertain, like I think that's marijuana, I'm going to take some photos. Why not run it by a friend? Like everyone has a stoner friend or like someone that they're just.
No, this one.
Wait, just Google. Oh my gosh, what am I thinking? Just Google marijuana plant and then just cross-reference that. Why wasn't there any cross-referencing?
No, because this person is looking for drama in their lives, no matter how much pain it's going to cause. Right. And they don't have any friends. You think that guy has friends? And I'm not putting it on the whole company. I'm putting it on that particular rep. Okay. All right. So now the second part of this is the elderly couple was absolutely right. It was a horribly dehumanizing thing. They wouldn't let her put the pants on, and they're handcuffed. They put her in a hot car for 20 minutes. Why? She's like really dangerous. What's she gonna do? Go plant some new plants? Like, if you don't handcuff her and stuff her in the police car?
And if she's high and she tries to run away, it'll just be like, oh, all right.
Like, come on. I mean, because there's, unfortunately, with cops, and this is what we've been talking about on the show for a long time, it only goes to 11, right? It's not 0 through 10, and there is no 2, and there is no 8. It's just fucking 11 every time. Like, you grab this fucking granny and throw her in the police car while we investigate your hibiscus. What if it was marijuana? What was she gonna do? Grip them all out and flush them down the toilet? Just calm down for a second and treat people as humans. And then, which then leads to poor Miss Kramer saying, quote, I was not treated as though I was a human being. And I just want to tell you, that's exactly why the movement is called Black Lives Matter. I, by the way, have no idea if they're white or black. I'm not saying that about them. I'm saying that black people in this country get this at an inordinate rate and a provable, statistically higher rate. And that's why, just like Miss Kramer, they say, can we also be treated as human beings? Our lives matter too. That's why we call it Black Lives Matter, because we'd like to be treated like we're human. So when we get this, view into how other people are treated in the country, and it's this poor older couple, or it's the nurse. You remember the nurse who was like, the guy went into the hospital in Utah, and arrested her, and she's like, "Well, I don't understand what's going on." And unfortunately, this is what a lot of people in the country, minorities, have to deal with day in, day out. This dehumanizing thing. So let this be a moment where we can go, oh yeah, we shouldn't treat our fellow citizens that way, no matter who they are.
Or what plants they have.
Yes, which leads to point number 3. OxyContin. I feel bad I didn't know this. There's a great New Yorker article that talks about this. It's legalized opium. It's twice the rate. Oxycodone is twice the rate of morphine. Okay, and it used to be watered down in things like Percocet with Tylenol. OxyContin does not water it down. It amplifies it. Contin means continuous. It's short for continuous. We have legalized continuous opium use at high dosages. But the pharmaceutical companies make money off that, so it's okay. But Miss Kramer had a hibiscus plant, and we had to go to 11, right? And just rip into the Kramers. This is the insanity of America.
And if I catch you with the geranium, I'll be back on Tuesday.
Is that geranium I see?
These people are mining geranium.
Oh, the Geranium 1?
Geranium 1, that's it. Okay. The Geranium 1 scandal.
You guys are having a blast over there.
We got it. We found it. We found it. Geranium 1 is a scandal.
God, man, this country is so warped. It's so warped. Anyway, all right, guys, we gotta go. We're way past time. We have a post game where we will discuss more sexual harassment. No, I'm kidding.
Fine with it.
So we will try to find a happy topic.
Yes.
We will try really hard to find a happy topic. For the members, we will cheer you up. TYTnetwork.com/join. That's a heavy promise, but we'll try to live
Yeah,
up.
right?
Okay.
I'm afraid. Bye.
All right.